All right, so tonight we're going to be working our way through the Gospel of Thomas, verses 95 through 98. And we're going to take a very interesting rabbit trail because that is what I do best. So, starting out in Thomas, verse 95, Jesus said, "If you have money, don't lend it at interest. Instead, give it to someone from whom you won't get it back." On to the next. Jesus said, "The Father's empire is like a woman who took a little leaven, hid it in dough, and made it into large loaves of bread. Whoever has ears to hear should listen." I will say that this is the complete Gospels version, and the Nag Hammadi version is slightly different. We will be working our way through the study with the Nag Hammadi version, but I think it was important to read it from this context as well. Verse 97, Jesus said, "The Father's empire is like a woman who was carrying a jar full of meal. While she was walking along a distant road, the handle of the jar broke and the meal spilled behind her along the road. She didn't know it. She hadn't noticed a problem. When she reached her house, she put the jar down and discovered that it was empty." Jesus said, "The Father's empire is like someone who wanted to kill a strong man. While still at home, he drew his sword and thrust it into the wall to find out whether his hand would be strong enough. Then he killed the strong man." Okay. So, starting back at verse 95. Jesus said, "If you have money, do not lend it at interest. Rather, give it to someone with whom you will not, or I'm sorry, from whom you will not get it back." So our first reference here is Matthew 5:42. "Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away." So basically, if anyone asks something of you, you give it to them and don't turn away from people who want to borrow from you. Now, our next reference is Didache, and I believe I'm saying that correctly, but don't quote me on that. And this is chapter 1, verses 5 through 6. "Give to everyone who asks you, and ask it not back. For the Father wills that to all should be given of our own blessings, free gifts. Happy is he who gives according to the commandment, for he is guiltless. Woe to him who receives, for if one receives who has need, he is guiltless. But he who receives not having need shall pay the penalty why he received, and for what. And coming into confinement, he shall be examined concerning the things which he has done, and he shall not escape from there until he pays back the last penny. And also concerning this, it has been said, let your alms sweat in your hands until you know to whom you should give." So this is a very interesting verse because basically it's saying if you have a need, then when you receive something, you will not be guilty of anything. But if you don't have a need and you receive something, then you are going to end up having to pay that back. And this last part about let your alms sweat in your hands until you know to whom you should give, it's kind of like saying, hold on to your giving, hold on to your money or whatever you're giving away until you receive confirmation that you're supposed to give it to someone, probably someone who asks of it. So,
Yeah, it is
uh,
very interesting and says
mhm.
a whole lot about the world we live in today.
Why?
Oh, I just feel like there's plenty of people. Okay, for example, how many conversations have been had about the people, that very small percent that owns a majority of the technical wealth, and what they actually do with it? They just sit on it and keep piling it up.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, they're like, "Oh, well, the problem with the world today is there's just too many mouths to feed, and we can't feed everybody." And and then needless to say, there's also so many houses that
Mm.
could be money is being allocated very incorrectly
Yeah. Well,
and
and
poorly.
that's greed. That is pure greed, right? Now,
So
my
wouldn't that
thing
kind of
is,
be the same thing in the sense? Stop,
oh,
Cheetah.
absolutely, absolutely. And here's the thing. The thing that concerns me most is so we used to be a family that gave a lot. We made sure that we did our 10%, whether that was to our church, to charities, or both. And we often gave more than 10% because we felt like that was right in the eyes of the Lord. But one day I heard a very interesting, I believe it was a sermon, and it was talking about giving to the poor. And I thought, well, hey, that's important to give to the poor. It's actually not what the Bible says. The Bible says to care for the widows, the orphans, and the foreigners, right? But it doesn't necessarily say give to the poor. Not that you can't, but it was specific about which ones of those we should really be caring for. And um in this sermon, it said, if you are just giving to people who are, panhandling, then you're kind of enabling that lifestyle. And when I thought about it, I may have shared this with you before, but I remember when I was little, there was an old man who, well, I guess at the time he was probably about my parents' age, but to me he was old. But he would stand on
Well,
the,
perspective.
yeah, but he would stand on the corner outside of the local diner that my grandparents went to pretty much every day. And he was fairly heavy set and quite disheveled looking. Well, one day my parents had taken me to a doctor's appointment, and this man pulled up in it was a BMW or a Mercedes. I remember it being like one of those real nice cars back then. So um and I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. I wasn't very old, but I remember them saying, "Oh, hey, that's the guy that usually stands on the corner out in front of the diner." And I got a good look at him, and it was, and he was nicely dressed, pulled up in a nice car, and he was taking his kids to their doctor's appointment. So that kind of stuck in my head, right? So when I heard this sermon talking about how if you give a man to fish, he'll eat for a day, but if you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime, and how just giving to people could potentially be enabling their behavior instead of just you being generous. And, I struggled with this a lot because I've always heard, oh, well, if you give them money, they're going to go do drugs or they're going to go buy alcohol. You shouldn't do that. And I used to think, well, but it's not my determination as to whatever they do with their money. If I give them money, I'm giving out of the kindness of my heart. What they do with that is between them and God. I did right. But then when I heard that sermon, I was like, oh, now I understand what they mean by that. Like, it's not about being greedy or selfish by saying, no, I'm sorry, I can't give to you. When I was in my 20s, there was a woman who always used to come up to me and ask me for tampons. And I didn't have any. Well, I'm sorry, she asked me for money for tampons. And I didn't have any tampons, so I always just gave her money. But then one day I caught wise to it, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to give her tampons. I went and I bought her an entire box of tampons. She looked at me like I was crazy when I handed her this box. She was like, what is that? I said, well, you always say you need tampons, so I bought you tampons. And she's like, I don't want that. So
Oh
then,
my God.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I
oh,
was like,
gotcha.
yeah, exactly. She never asked me for money again after that. And I saw her
That
every
just floors me.
Mhm.
I had always been conflicted with that. When I started actively giving, it was back in Roanoke and it was to the women's shelter. And I felt really good about giving to that because we were giving food to them. And I knew that they usually have, well, whatever they get, and it's not really real food.
Mhm.
It's whatever they get.
Yeah.
And I had wanted to share money with people on the streets, but I'm not gonna lie. my thought that I had with most of them, and Chris had opened my eyes to that, especially when he was going through addiction, on how people panhandle, and it's actually quite manipulative.
Yeah,
And, you think you're doing something out of the kindness of your heart. And, and I had thought the same way too. Well, I don't know what they're going to do with the money, but is it up to me to be like, how dare you take the money, my hard earned money, and spend it on X, Y, and Z?
yeah.
But in the same token, yeah, I
Well,
get the whole enablers, because it really opened my eyes. I was like, wow, there's just people really pulling on heartstrings
yeah. Oh yeah.
to get what they want, and they're living a way, I wouldn't say better life. They are living with more. No, okay. You know what? You know what I'm putting down. I'm not putting words to that. I'm
I
not
get it.
sure how to word that.
I get it. It's okay. You
But
don't
you
need
get what
to.
I'm saying.
Yes. Yes, they're more affluent than they're leading you to believe. Yes. Um,
Yes.
well, and I've even offered people like opportunities to make money instead of just saying, well, here's some cash. Oh, well, you need help then. Here's a way to make money. And they
What
don't
do you
ever take it.
mean?
Yeah.
They get really yeah, they could get pretty nasty. And then when I realized that panhandlers have become a lot more aggressive,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
it's this whole different thing. So it's interesting it says that, but where he said about like women and the widowed and
Mhm.
orphans. Because
Yeah.
honestly, but then that also stinks, because you could be trying to give to them and you don't know if that money is actually going to them, because there's more deceptive people.
So that was actually to my next point is that a lot of these very wealthy slash greedy people run charities and they use that as tax write-offs,
Mhm.
right? Because they're using these charities to bring in money, and yet the people that they're supposed to benefit, they're lucky to even get 5% of what the charity takes in. So
That's crap.
yeah, and this is including like Christian charities and things like that. There's plenty of charities. I actually, when they call me now, I tell them, I appreciate what you're trying to do here, but I don't give to large, corporate charities anymore. Instead, I help in my local community. If you're giving food to the local women's shelter, that's benefiting your local
Yeah.
community. You can help in your own backyard, but to just send your money off to some random charity, oh, please, we need help feeding the poor. And half the time, it maybe the charity doesn't even keep all of the money, but then they're sending stuff over to another country, and the rich warlords in that country won't give the things that the people need to the people that need it. So it's a moot point. You're just making rich people richer
Yeah.
by giving. So it's really challenging to be able to be the hands and feet of Christ in this day and age unless you are literally helping out in your local community and being
Yes.
the feet on the street. You know what I mean?
And not for that, or not for nothing, that really I really enjoyed doing that, because I was able to have my garden and bring them fresh produce
Mhm.
to the shelter, knowing it was going to them.
Yeah.
And that felt really good, because yeah, there's a lot of times that all these big organizations, you're right. How many times people, again, heartstrings,
Yeah.
that even with oh, why can't I think of it? The cancer. What
Oh,
the heck is her
I
name?
don't give to those at all.
Mm-mm. But how long have, oh my gosh, Judah. How long have people at all these events, and then not just are they taking money from people that's not really going to help anybody, but
Mhm.
then they're feeding them the very things that exacerbates the
Yeah,
problem.
exactly. Yeah,
Oh
I don't
boy.
do it anymore. And it's so unfortunate to have to be that way. But like you said, it's discernment. And we can't just be throwing our pearls to swine or casting our
That keeps
treasures
coming up
before
too.
dogs, right? Can't do it.
But I think that's what comes with wisdom, though.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, before I wasn't, wouldn't say naive of the world, but in a sense,
No, you were
did.
naive. It's okay. You can say it. I was too.
I did. Judah,
You had
please
a you
stop.
had a hope for humanity, that you
Very much
probably
so.
thought that people were generally good and
Yeah, that's not so much the case now, unfortunately. I
yeah,
wish it were so, but
yeah.
most people, especially given circumstances and how our brains are wired and how trauma, everything. There's so many different Judah, different factors. Oh my God, little baby. Sorry, he put he's getting run into the fan. He's not going to bed right now, so Jack went to sleep. I don't hear the other two, so it's just him right now.
Well, so now we kind of understand the significance of let your alms sweat in your hands until you know to whom you should give, right?
Yeah.
Because now we're seeing that just because we have the ability to give or the things to give, it doesn't necessarily mean that we should just go give it to any old body, because there's probably someone who actually does need it and who will ask for it. And this brings up another point too, because if we look at what Christ said about whatever you ask, you will receive, knock and the door will be open to you. If people need something but aren't willing to ask of it, that then is kind of a downfall for them, right? And I can see this and say this as I've experienced in my own life, because there's been plenty of times that I've needed help or needed a resource of some kind, and I never asked, so I didn't get it, and Billy can attest to this, that um there are times where I'm just like so frazzled with something, and he's like, do you need help? And I'm like, yes, I need help. But he's like, well, all you had to do was ask, right?
Yeah. But
I've gotten
sometimes
better.
it's come a long way. I mean, even the process, Judah. Oh my gosh, little baby. Like I said, these energies are just so much fun.
Mhm.
Um, oh boy, I was gonna say something in regards to that, but I'm trying to
Asking for
stop
help.
Judah from waking Jack up. Oh, asking and receiving.
Yeah.
There, Chris had mentioned before about how they would pretty much go hungry because his dad was too prideful to ask for help.
Mhm.
And there were times that when we were in the thick of things, I was like, you need to put your damn pride aside. If we need help, you ask for help. And there's so many times people don't ask for help because pride's in the way, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, not just pride. Hang on, I'm sorry.
You're good.
I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna try to get him to sleep again.
All righty. All right. So Luke 6, verses 30 through 36. Give to every man that asketh of thee, and of him that taketh away thy goods, ask them not again. And as ye would that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise. So basically, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, right? For if ye love them which love you, what thank have ye? For sinners also love those that love them. And if ye do good to them which do good to you, what thank have ye? For sinners also do even the same. And if ye lend to them of whom ye hope to receive, what thank have ye? For sinners also lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love ye your enemies, and do good, and lend, hoping for nothing again. and your reward shall be great, and ye shall be the children of the highest, for he is kind unto he is kind unto the unthankful and to the evil. Be ye therefore merciful, as your Father also is merciful. So he's kind even to those who are thankless and are evil, right? But I think that this goes beyond just providing money to people, right? We're doing good, we're lending, and we're not expecting anything in return, even of those who are unthankful or who are evil, are unkind, or are our enemies, right? But I wanted to dig in a little bit about this concept of our Father being merciful, because this is Christ talking here. And Christ says that our Father is merciful. But was the God of the Old Testament merciful? So let's look at Exodus 32, verses 1 through 35.
It's about to get good.
And this isn't even the rabbit trail. This is a
No,
little
but
rabbit trail.
these are things that when I honestly was going through the Bible, I asked.
Okay. Exodus 32, verse 1. And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Up, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him. And Aaron said unto them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them unto me. And all the people brake off the golden earrings which were in their ears, and brought them unto Aaron. And he received them at their hand, and fashioned it with a graving tool, after he had made it a molten calf. And they said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made proclamation and said, Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord. And they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go get thee down, for thy people, which thou broughtst out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made them a molten calf, and have worshipped it, and have sacrificed thereunto, and said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which have brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And the Lord said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Now, therefore, let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. And Moses besought the Lord his God and said, Lord, why doth thy wrath wax hot against thy people, which thou hast brought forth out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Wherefore should the Egyptians speak and say, For mischief did he bring them out, to slay them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from thy fierce wrath and repent of this evil against thy people. So Moses is telling God to repent of his own evil, okay? Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, thy servants, to whom thou swarest by thine own self, and saidst unto them, I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have spoken of will I give unto your seed, and they shall inherit it forever. And the Lord repented of the evil which he thought to do unto his people. And Moses turned and went down from the mount, and the 2 tables of the testimony were in his hand. The tables were written on both their sides, on the one side and on the other were they written. And the tables were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God, graven upon the tables. And when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said unto Moses, There is a noise of war in the camp. And he said, It is not the voice of them that shout for mastery, neither is it the voice of them that cry for being overcome, but the noise of them that sing do I hear. Okay, so Moses is descending from the mountain with the 10 commandments in his hands. Okay, this is after he has convinced God to not smite his people for being stiff-necked, idol worshippers. Okay. And Joshua comes to him and says, they're not crying, they're not shouting because they want to be better. They're not shouting because they're being overcome like by an enemy. They're singing. Okay. So now Moses gets angry. And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing. And Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hands and brake them beneath the mount. And he took the calf which they had made and burnt it in the fire, and ground it to powder, and strawed it upon the water, and made the children of Israel drink of it. So now they're drinking burnt gold pieces. And Moses said unto Aaron, what did this people unto thee, that thou hast brought so great a sin upon them? And Aaron said, let not the anger of my Lord wax hot. Now, mind you, the Lord here is not in capital letters, so he's referring to Moses. He's calling Moses like his Lord or his master. Let not the anger of my Lord wax hot. Thou knowest the people that they are set on mischief. For they said unto me, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him. And I said, oh, I lost it. Oh, sorry. And I said unto them, whosoever hath any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it to me. Then I cast it into the fire, and there came out this calf. So magically, this calf just came out. No, earlier it said Aaron was the one that fashioned the calf, right? Okay. And when Moses saw that the people were naked, for Aaron had made them naked unto their shame among their enemies. Whoa, where'd that come from? Then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, who is on the Lord's side? Let him come unto me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. And he said unto them, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses. And there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men. For Moses had said, consecrate yourselves today to the Lord, even every man upon his son and upon his brother, that he may bestow upon you a blessing this day. And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses said unto the people, ye have sinned a great sin, and now I will go up unto the Lord. Peradventure I shall make an atonement for your sin. And Moses returned unto the Lord and said, oh, this people have sinned a great sin, and have made them gods of gold. Yet now, if thou wilt forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book which thou hast written. And the Lord said unto Moses, whosoever hath sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book. Therefore, now go, lead the people unto the place of which I have spoken unto thee. Behold, mine angel shall go before thee. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit, I will visit their sin upon them. And the Lord plagued the people because they made the calf which Aaron made. So, knowing what Christ said about the Father being merciful even to those who are unthankful and evil, right? The people in the desert were unthankful, and I wouldn't necessarily say they were evil, but they were certainly being sinful according to God and according to Moses. And God was prepared to smite them. Moses pleaded on their behalf. And then when he saw that the people were sinful, he went down and claimed that the Lord had told him to kill a bunch of the people within the camp. Now, we don't see that exchange between Moses and the Lord, but after that has been done, Moses goes to God again and is like, hey, I hope that this can be all right, but if not, you can take me out of the book. And the Lord's like, well, I'll take whoever has sinned out of my book, and then proceeds to plague the people. I don't know about you, but that doesn't really sound very merciful to me.
Not at all. And that was when I first started reading the Bible, that was a problem that I had with the Bible. I was like, that's not the God that I believe in.
Mm-hmm.
That's just awful. And exactly, a loving, unconditional love, that is not that.
Well, and when we go back to what we were talking about last week with regards to Jesus saying to the scribes and the Pharisees, your father is not my father, and they're like, well, our father is Abraham, and he's like, trust me, you are of your father the devil, right? Paraphrasing, of course, but so let's look at another example. 1 Samuel 15:3. This is much shorter. Now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. Okay, so this was the Lord speaking to Samuel to tell Saul, King Saul, to go and utterly destroy the Amalekites. Okay, they did not utterly destroy the Amalekites. They kept the King Agag, right? And the Lord was upset with them for that. So,
But the other thing, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Even what we were talking about before with giving, and you saying being specific to like widowed women and orphan, I had found many times when I was reading the Bible alone, lots of times it was like, don't spare any woman or child, like kill them all. And yeah, that just sounds very not like a merciful, loving father.
mhm. Well, now the common reason given in the church is that, these children would have grown up to want to avenge their parents. So they would have kept the traditions alive despite not having anyone to teach them that. And they would have wanted to seek revenge on the Israelites. And um, we can even see that playing out in history. There have been a number of times where a group of people have been overtaken, but instead of killing the children, they would enslave the children, and the children would then grow up to have this hatred for their captors and would ultimately kill them. This even plays out in the Game of Thrones, right? And that's just a TV show, but the concept remains the same throughout history. So it's understandable, but I still don't understand how a God who says that the sacrifice of children is a detestable thing, that it's an abomination, and yet turns around and tells his people to annihilate every man, woman, and child because of the fact that they are a certain group of people and they don't follow or worship him. What happened to mercy? Right?
So then, well, okay, I'll let you continue. I'll just put a short little something in the chat. And if you feel like continuing with that, I'll just listen and see what you have to say.
All right. Yeah, go ahead. Put it in the chat. So moving on to verse 96, and once you get that in the chat, I will address it accordingly. I was reading a little bit about the Crusades today and about how the Persians were like shutting that down. I feel like that's a large topic to go into right now, and I would like to come a little bit better prepared, but I think that I was just learning the other day that the age of chivalry was a result of the violence that came up out of the Crusades, these Christian men that were basically raping and pillaging towns. And because they were so violent and bloodthirsty, the church kind of put this moral code on them. And that was a way of like keeping them in line. But then these crusaders still thought, oh, well, since we're abiding by this moral code, we can still like make you let us take advantage of you, kind of a thing. So it was really quite disturbing. That's an interesting rabbit hole to go down. I would say that we would need a whole separate session for that because that's a big rabbit hole. But it definitely it definitely is concerning, and this is probably why there's so much um negative perspectives of the church, because the church was the ones that were consigning this or co-signing this. They, in fact, I mean, if you look at the Cathars and how they were treated, I mean, they were burned at the stake for choosing to believe in what the church was considering heresy, when in actuality it was closer to Gnosticism or even the way of the Essenes. And many scholars believe that the Cathars were actually the Essenes, that had managed to escape persecution for hundreds of years before they ended up in France. So again, that's a large topic. Uh, and we can talk about that on another thing, but it's definitely something to keep in the back of your mind as you think of the kind of things that are done in the name of God and which God we're referring to. Okay, verse 96. Jesus said, "The Father's kingdom is like a woman. She took a little yeast, hid it in dough, and made it into large loaves of bread. Whoever has ears should hear." Okay, so first we're going to look at the parallel in the Gospels. Matthew 13:33. Another parable spake he unto them. The kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal, till the whole was leavened. And then Luke 13, verses 20 through 21. And again he said, Whereunto shall I liken the kingdom of God? It is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal, till the whole was leavened. So, what could this actually mean? I want to back up a little bit. So, before Matthew 13:33, and also before Luke 13:20 through 21, we have this scripture, and they're nearly identical between Matthew 13 and Luke 13. So I'm not going to be redundant here. I'm just going to read from Matthew 13:31 through 32. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds. But when it is grown, it is the greatest among herbs, and becometh a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. So we have a little bit of an expansion on this topic, right? Christ is trying to explain to them what the kingdom of heaven is like. But now Paul uses this concept a little bit differently. And I want to kind of talk about the significance of leaven, because according to Paul, it's used to illustrate how sin pervades the church. In Galatians 5:9, Paul says, a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump, meaning if a little bit of sin gets in, then it can spoil the whole bunch. One bad apple corrupts the whole bunch, right? But what is the significance of leaven? Okay, so we see in Exodus 12, verses 14 through 22, the explanation of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So we're going to go over there. And Exodus 12, starting in verse 14. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. 7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread. Even the first day ye shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eateth leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. And in the first day there shall be an holy convocation, and in the seventh day there shall be an holy convocation to you. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat, that only may be done of you. So you're supposed to have a holy celebration at the beginning and at the end, and the only work you're supposed to be doing is to be able to make your food and eat it. And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in this selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at even or evening, ye shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at even. 7 days shall there be no leaven found in your houses. For whosoever eateth that which is leavened, even that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he be a stranger or born in the land. Ye shall eat nothing leavened. In all your habitations shall ye eat unleavened bread. Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said unto them, Draw out and take you a lamb according to your families, and kill the Passover. And ye shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the two side posts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning. So, first of all, Moses was the one that told them to slaughter the lamb and put the blood over their houses. Okay. But the leavening, when this Feast of Unleavened Bread occurs, also known as Pesach or Passover, which Christ did celebrate when he was on earth. The prior to this, the Hebrew people will clean out their houses to make sure that there's no leaven or yeast left in their homes. Okay. Leaven is something that is it helps with like fermentation. Okay. So we're going to look at this word leaven to see what exactly it means. Okay. So we're going to go here first. This is the word.
Strong's H 7603. Seor. Seor.
Okay. So barm or yeast cake as swelling by fermentation. Okay. In the Gesenius' Hebrew Chaldee lexicon, it's fermentation or leaven. Okay. Now, notice here that we have this H7604 from the root word etymology. Okay, so I just want to point this out here. So the first one is H7603, next one is H7604. Okay, so here's the word.
Strong's H 7604. Sha'er. Sha'er.
To remain, be left over, be left behind. Okay, so this is a remnant. To spare, to keep over, to have left, properly to swell up or be redundant. Reserve the rest, to be left or to remain. Okay, so this is the remnant. This is the leftovers. Now, remember what God told the Israelites when they were in the desert, that they were not supposed to have leftovers, right? And now oftentimes we see, oh, we are the remnant. We're the leftovers of Israel, and we need to be keeping the kingdom of God alive, right? But so let's look at these two words here, because this is leaven, right? And this is remnant. Notice the differences between the letters. We have Shin, Aleph, Resh. Okay, so this first one here is Shin, that's Shin. This is Aleph, and this is Resh. Okay, all together. Notice though that we have these odd little markings. Okay, these are diacritic markings that were added by the Masoretes to basically show vowel points. Because remember, the Hebrew language is only consonants, it doesn't have vowels. With, I would say, the exception of Aleph, but Aleph is more of like a breath. So, but it tends to be interpreted as an A, as an E, as an I, and sometimes as a U. So that's kind of like the vowel. That's really the only vowel they need. But the Masoretes have added vowel points. And this is where we travel down a rabbit hole. Okay. Let's look at who the Masoretes were. The Masoretes, also known as masters of the tradition, were groups of Jewish scribe scholars who worked from around the end of the 5th through 10th centuries CE, so current era. This would be after Christ's death and resurrection, okay? Based primarily in medieval Palestine in the cities of Tiberias and Jerusalem, as well as in Iraq or Babylonia. Each group compiled a system of pronunciation and grammatical guides in the form of diacritical notes, or nichud, on the external form of the biblical text in an attempt to standardize the pronunciation, paragraph, and verse divisions and cantillation of the Hebrew Bible, or the Tanakh, for the worldwide Jewish community. The Ben Asher family of Masoretes was largely responsible for the preservation and production of the Masoretic text. Although there existed an alternative Masoretic text of the Ben Naphtali Masoretes, which has around 875 differences from the Ben Asher text, the halakhic authority Maimonides endorsed the Ben Asher as superior, although the Egyptian Jewish scholar Saadia Gaon al-Fayumi had preferred the Ben Naphtali system. It has been suggested that the Ben Asher family and the majority of the Masoretes were Karaites. However, Jeffrey Kahn believes that the Ben Asher family was probably not Karaite, and Aaron Doughton avers that there are decisive proofs that M. Ben Asher was not a Karaite. Well, we don't know about that, but the Masoretes devised the vowel notation system for Hebrew that is still widely used, as well as the trope symbols used for cantillation. Okay, so I'm going to play for you a quick video, and hopefully, because it's a little bit faster, YouTube won't flag me for it, but we shall see.
The Talmud mentions scribes that were employed in the temple to correct scrolls that were found to have had mistakes. They would check out for master copies located within the temple premises. This ensured standardization. According to the Talmud, the kings of Israel were required to write a Torah scroll and keep it with them throughout their lives. After their death, it was brought to the temple to serve as a master copy.
Okay, so we're going to look at a couple of these verses. And we're going to look at them in two different translations. Now, typically when I do these studies, I do them in the King James Version. And it has come to my attention very recently that the King James Version is based on the Masoretic translations. Okay, so we're going to look at that, and then I'm going to show you something different. So first, we're going to look at Hebrews 10:5 in the King James Version. Wherefore, when he cometh into the world, he saith, sacrifice and offering thou wouldest not, but a body hast thou prepared me. Okay. Now we're going to look at, let's go back first. So I'm going to change this to what's called the Septuagint. Okay. And I'm going to try to get it in English form. Hold on. I'm going to have to figure this one out here. I may have to do it through the Bible app. Okay, well, gotta download it. My apologies. I'm gonna do this first one here. So the Septuagint is an interesting text, actually. I have a couple of images that I would like to share with you. First, pull them up. While we're waiting on that, I'm going to go ahead and pull this version up. Nope, that's not right. Good gracious. I did it last night, but I did it on my phone, so my apologies. It's supposed to be a Greek and English compilation. So my apologies. Who was this one? Oh, I had the right one. And I'll do this one just in case. This one just in case too. Okay. See, I knew that would be uncomfortable. Thank you for your patience. What's this one? I was just reading it in English last night. Now it's not gonna let me do it. Dang it. Okay. This one is this one. Well, darn. Now I feel like an idiot. Yes. Okay. So the Septuagint. Let's talk about this real quick. I am going to open these up on my iPad. I don't know why I can't get this. I did it last night on my phone. Okay. So this is just one of the examples. Yeah, technology. Ugh. Okay. Anyway, this is just one of the examples. The Septuagint says, "Ye who are approaching the evil day, who are drawing near and adopting false Sabbaths." And then in the Masoretic text, it says, "Do you put off the day of punishment, yet cause the seat of violence to come near?" So it's a completely different translation. All right. This is a graphic of the Bibles that have kind of come out of the Hebrew scrolls. Okay. So first, the Hebrew texts were written down on papyrus and leather scrolls between 1300 to 165 BC. Remember, this is before the birth of Christ. Okay. This is at least anywhere from 1300 years before the birth of Christ up to 165 years before the birth of Christ. Okay. The Septuagint is, come on, was the first translation out of the Hebrew scrolls into Greek, which was the common language even of the Hebrew scribes. They lived in and around that area. Pretty much everyone was able to speak Greek. Okay, so the Septuagint was recorded between 250 to 50 BC. So again, still anywhere from 250 to 50 years prior to the birth of Christ. Okay. Now, the texts that were edited into present day form by Jewish scholars called the Masoretes didn't occur until between the 7th and the 9th centuries AD. Now remember what we had over here in Wikipedia, some slight variations, but basically they worked on it from between the 5th through the 10th centuries. Okay, that's more than 1,000 years difference between the Septuagint and the Masoretic text. Okay, again, as we get down through this, the King James Bible, the Revised Standard Version, all of these different Bibles come from the Masoretic texts. Okay. We've been reading translations out of the Masoretic texts. Now, I still want to try to pull this up. I may have to do it on my phone, but let's see. Okay, so we're back to the King James. So Psalm 40, verse 6. Sacrifice and offering thou didst not desire. Mine ears hast thou opened. Burnt offering and sin offering hast thou not required. Actually, pause. Okay, so as I have struggled to locate an English version of the Septuagint, I will say that the Oxford Study Bible seems to be the most recommended among the scholars. But let's look at an example, and this comes from Christopher Enoch over on TikTok. So hopefully I am not hit by a copyright issue on YouTube. We'll see.
In a previous video, I presented hard evidence that the Septuagint is the scriptures that the apostles and the early church used for hundreds of years. Right here, I have the Brenton version. Now, the Septuagint is a very ancient translation from the original Hebrew Old Testament into the Greek. It was completed hundreds of years before Jesus was even born. And this is Exhibit B of that fact. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 5. Therefore, when he came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you have prepared for me. This is implying that the physical body of Jesus was the sacrifice. Now, this New Testament passage is quoting Psalm chapter 40, verse 6. This is Psalm chapter 40, verse 6. This is from your typical Protestant Bible. It says, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, my ears you have opened. But the Septuagint says, sacrifice and offering you would not, but a body which you have prepared for me. This is in line with Hebrews chapter 10, verse 5. In a previous video, I presented hard evidence. I'm reading from the works of Josephus by Whiston. The Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 3, verse 84. He said, Canaan, when he had lived 910 years, had his son Mahalaleel, who was born in his 170th year. Now I'm reading from the King James Version, which is based upon the Masoretic text. Genesis chapter 5, verse 12. It says, Canaan lived 70 years and begat Mahalaleel. But Josephus says he was 170, not 70. But the Septuagint version of Genesis 5, verse 12, says that Canaan was 170 years when he begot Mahalaleel. Now this again proves that Josephus was much more aligned with the Septuagint version of manuscripts than with the Masoretic text.
Okay. So I apologize that I was not able to locate the English translation of the Septuagint for these particular verses, but well worth digging into if you can find them. Katie, you said you have the Oxford version. Is that the Oxford Study Bible? Because I have an Oxford Annotated Bible, but I do not believe that it is based off of the Septuagint. It's because it's the Revised Standard Version. So I don't think that is. I believe that's a Masoretic basis. Okay, cool. Yeah, let me know, because if you have that, that'd be awesome. Okay, so this is actually what Justin Martyr said in approximately 150 AD. Okay, this was in reference to the issues that he was seeing with people trying to diverge from the Septuagint. But I am far from putting reliance in your teachers, who refuse to admit that the interpretation made by the 70 elders who were with Ptolemy, king of the Egyptians, is a correct one, and they attempt to frame another. And I wish you to observe that they have altogether taken away many scriptures from the Septuagint translations affected by those 70 elders who were with Ptolemy, and by which this very man who was crucified is proved to have been set forth expressly as God and man, and as being crucified and as dying. Okay. And I would encourage you to go to preachersinstitute.com. I can put the link in the description of the video, and I can send it to the private chat. But this gives a really good explanation of the differences between the Masoretic text and the Septuagint, and the kind of implications that that has for the changing of the word. But suffice it to say, there were many, many, many changes between the texts, hundreds and hundreds of changes between the Septuagint and the Masoretic texts, things that were taken out entirely, things that were translated differently. The Septuagint, it's also worth noting, was the authoritative text which Christ and the apostles would have been using during their time on earth. So there's that. Okay. All right. That was our rabbit hole for today. We can dig into it deeper at another time, but can you show me the most correct Iowa? Yes, knock and you shall receive it, right? The door will be open to you. 21:21, no coincidence there. Verse 97, Jesus said, "The Father's kingdom is like a woman who was carrying a jar full of meal. While she was walking along a distant road, the handle of the jar broke and the meal spilled behind her along the road. She did not know it." That fireworks? I think that's fireworks. She had not noticed a problem. When she reached her house, she put the jar down and discovered that it was empty. Okay. So we have a few notes here on this particular one. The complete gospel says, while she was walking along a distant road. The text is deficient here. An alternative rendering is, while she was walking on the road, still far off. So maybe she had a long way to go to get home. In the Nag Hammadi, the note is, she had not noticed anything while she toiled. So while she was busy working, walking, whatever. The Nag Hammadi also says that this parable is known only here in early Christian literature, though a somewhat similar story is found in Macarius of Syria. So my question is, what could this mean? The other note that we have in the complete gospels is she hadn't noticed a problem, or she had not understood how to toil. My thoughts on this, and I would love to hear your thoughts, but my thoughts on this are, thus far we have seen that Christ is talking about the kingdom of heaven possibly being like this expansion, right? A mustard seed is very small, but it gets very large, as we saw in Matthew 13:31 through 32. It grows into one of the largest trees that we have on earth today, and many birds make their homes in its branches, right? So the kingdom of heaven is like something that is very small, and it grows very large over time and becomes a safe haven, right? The kingdom of heaven is also like a little bit of leaven that was added into some dough, which ended up becoming 3 large loaves of bread. Okay, so again, this is this idea of expansion. So even if there's a remnant, if there's a little bit, it can, quote, leaven the whole lump. Okay, so the kingdom of heaven works in the same way that Paul claims sin works, right? This idea that it grows, it expands. Now, here's the thing, though. This is a completely different concept with this woman. She's walking and she's letting it spill out behind her, not knowing that when she gets back, there's nothing left. So is this saying that the kingdom of heaven is now spread out all over the place because this woman has just kind of spilled it out behind her? Or is it saying that the kingdom of heaven can kind of dissipate over time if you're not paying attention or if you're not understanding how to take good care of it, right? Kind of like that seed, right? We want to nourish and take care of that seed so that it grows and grows and grows. We want to make sure that our jar is not broken, our holy vessel is not broken, so that we're not leaking out. I mean, maybe we want to leak out heaven, right? But at the same time, we don't want to leak it out so much so that when we get home, we don't have any left. Right. So these verses are very elusive, and I would love to hear what your perspective is on this, Katie. If you have a perspective on this as well, Billy, I would love to hear it. These are kind of cryptic verses, right? Challenging.
Billy gonna add?
He's quiet. He's just grinning at me.
You know you want to.
What are your thoughts on it, Katie?
I don't know. It's actually quite interesting. I mean, perhaps if maybe it's leading people to heaven if she leaves it behind.
Okay, that's a good point. Kind of like a little trail.
But you also make a good point about you don't want to essentially, especially, we're like, oh, you got to fill your cup first before putting into others. So we don't want to come home and have no heaven.
Absolutely.
So that is very interesting. Because clearly, if someone spent all that time walking it back and then they had nothing except an empty jar.
So I feel like it's something that needs to be kind of cultivated and cared for. It needs to be something that we're always aware of. What do you think? You got any thoughts?
Yeah.
Billy said, "Don't break the jar." But I mean, it's true. Even so, like if we look back to the concept of the mustard seed, and then we kind of bring in the idea of the parable of the sower, where if you throw seeds on gravel, it's going to get picked at by the birds. It's not really going to grow. If you throw seeds in the weeds, they're going to be choked out by the weeds. They're not going to get the sunshine and the resources that they need. But if you throw the seeds on good soil, then it's going to grow. And this is exactly what he was talking about, was this idea that the word planted in good soil would grow. Well, the word in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. What was the word? The word was God. The kingdom of heaven is also part of God, right? So wouldn't we want to care for and cultivate that kingdom within ourselves and not be walking around with a broken jar, right?
Oh my gosh. What if that jar symbolizes us being the vessel and that's being our spirit?
That's what I mean. And think about that from an energy perspective, right? You and I, we study energy medicine, and knowing what we know about having to care for our own vessel in order to be able to help other people with their energy needs, we cannot just go leaking out energy, right? I learned a few weeks ago that we can actually hemorrhage energy, hemorrhage our soul, our spirit right out the darn vessel of us, and be basically like bleeding to death spiritually, energetically.
Well, in that sense, then that for me, that resonates a whole lot more looking at that jar then as a vessel, like our body and our spirit being what leaked out of it. Then how Billy said, yeah, you better make sure you don't break that jar. That's very important. You really need your due diligence to take care of it and to be watching it to make sure it's not going to be leaking out.
Well, and if we go back to, several times Christ in the Gospel of Thomas has said, the kingdom of heaven is inside you. It is
Oh,
within
yeah.
you,
Valid point.
right?
So
So,
that definitely solidifies that more in
uh-huh.
my eyes.
Well, so let's add a bit more complexity to it. Verse
Sure.
98, Jesus said, the Father's kingdom is like a person who wanted to put someone powerful to death. While at home, he drew his sword and thrust it into the wall to find out whether his hand would go in. Then he killed the powerful one. Holy bananas. Now we go from first we're planting trees. Then we're walking around with a broken jar, and now we're stabbing the wall and killing people. What do you think this means?
The
Why
Wizard of Oz. He's
why
stabbing behind the curtain without seeing what's behind the curtain.
why would we, if we wanted to kill a powerful person, go and stab our wall? Why would we do that?
Well, clearly then we know that something else bigger exists that we can't visually see
Okay.
with our own perception, at least in this physical realm,
All
at
right.
least for some of us, to a
So
degree.
you said so we wouldn't go and kill the powerful person, but it says then he killed the powerful one. Okay. Here's the thing I think we need to pay attention to. While at home, he drew his sword and thrust it into the wall to find out whether his hand would go in. What was he doing?
What about ego?
Okay. What about ego? Expound upon that.
Okay, so the Father's kingdom is like a person who wanted to put someone powerful to death. In this physical realm, what are most people controlled by? Their ego. So while at home, home being our vessel, he drew his sword and thrust it in the wall, perhaps sorry, Tita, our vessel wall, to find whether his hand would go in, and then he killed the powerful one. You kill the powerful one, perhaps that is the ego that you could kill to get to the Father's kingdom. I don't know. That's
That
what popped in my head.
that's an interesting take. Somebody just knocked on the door. What?
Ask and you shall receive.
Oh,
Open the door.
sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I don't know. You're talking because honestly, there's so much that goes into it. A lot of people see the Bible very physical and literal, but
Mhm.
there's so much more to it that's ethereal. And again, if you have ears to hear and eyes to see, why could this not be talking about again like one of those physical deaths then to get
Okay.
to the kingdom?
So I really like where you took this. I gotta say, that's not where I took it at all. I took this as being like he's practicing, he's perfecting his abilities. And when we think about this, again, in terms of energy, in terms of being a vessel for the kingdom, when we are actively taking time to perfect our connection with God and perfect and protect our energy and our understanding of the spirit, then I think that we are well equipped to be able to handle what otherwise would seem insurmountable. Like this person wasn't just going to walk into the king's house or whatever and execute them without having a chance to practice. What came to mind as we were reading this was how often my sons practice their sparring. They're always, upstairs fighting with each other, not like bad, like they're wanting to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
better at fighting. And they have, Caleb has a sparring dummy that he wrestles with, and he has a punching bag that comes back at him so that he can kind of learn how to duck and move out of the way and bob and weave and all of that. And he's doing that so that whenever the opportunity should arise, if he gets into a fight, he will be well equipped to handle that because of the experiences that he had as a child, very tender-hearted child. He was getting picked on and bullied, and he was not prepared for that. So now he's prepared for that. And it's interesting that this note here that came from the Complete Gospels, it says the parable probably envisions a modest peasant home of mud brick whose walls would serve well as a surface on which to practice one's thrust. So that brings us into some of the scriptures that were suggested as parallels to this. So the first one is the Gospel of Thomas 35. Jesus said, one can't enter a strong person's house and take it by force without tying his hands. Then one can loot his house. So again, this is someone who needs to be prepared. It's kind of like the watcher on the wall. You know, you're watching. The thief doesn't come when the owner of the home is watching. They always come and catch them off guard, right? Well, this strong person, the only way that you're going to be able to take it by force is by tying him up. Matthew 11:12-13. And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John. That's very interesting. Hold on to that. So Luke 16:16. The law and the prophets were until John. Since that time, the kingdom of God is preached, and every man presseth into it. So this idea of the kingdom of heaven suffering violence and being taken by force, this brings to mind for me these secret societies, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Sanhedrin, all kind of guarding the secrets, guarding the wisdom of how to experience the kingdom of heaven here on earth. And everyone kind of clamoring to get to it, right? Every man presses into it. We are seeing this idea that, you know, the kingdom of heaven is highly prized. It's something that everyone wants to attain, whether they know it or not. And a lot of people will fight to protect, to keep it from those of us who are searching. And who are they? Could they be the powerful ones? Could they be the ones with the ego? On the flip side of that, to your point, will our own ego keep us from attaining the kingdom of heaven? And how then do we stand up against that? How then do we take that by force instead of just passively waiting for the kingdom to come to us? One of the things that we were discussing in the very beginning of this session was our willingness to continue to be here every week to study the word, regardless of who else is here. Doing the work, putting in the effort, seeing how the Spirit moves and works through our study, even getting down to these ideas that, oh crap, all this time we've been studying from a Bible that has all of these errors. Not to say that the Septuagint is necessarily any better, but there are a lot of significant differences, and I would encourage you to look into it deeper. I apologize that I wasn't able to give a more thorough presentation of that. I really thought I had it figured out last night, but apparently I was wrong. So my apologies for that. But if you dig, I would encourage you to look up the Septuagint. I would encourage you to read the resource that I have here from the Preachers Institute in its entirety. Look up the Masoretic text. You will not find as much as you would think you would, but there are some commentaries on it on YouTube. There are some commentaries on TikTok, not many on either of those platforms, but some. And then, of course, there are some articles online I will say, though, that a lot of the early church fathers, like Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Josephus, all of these people were kind of like, I mean, Josephus was a Jewish historian, not a church father, but still, a lot of these people were refuting the Masoretic translations of the text. And for them to have been so much later than the text that Christ and his disciples would have been using should at least give us cause to go back and dig a little deeper and do a little bit more research. And this also kind of explains where we see all of these variations in the text, because they were being translated and retranslated from imperfect translations to begin with. So, we, the ones who are doing the work, we are the ones who are thrusting our swords into the wall. We are the ones who are tending to the seeds to make sure they are on good soil. We are the ones that are carrying our jars carefully to make sure that our handles don't break. We're doing the work, and we're able to start to see things that those who are not doing the work, who are just allowing someone else to kind of spoon feed them, they're not seeing that same kind of return. You know what I mean? So that is what I have for you this evening. Yes, exactly. Faith through action. Final thoughts, questions, comments. You guys have anything?
No, I mean, I think it was still a really good study, and the last ones certainly are very interesting to decipher, and I absolutely get what you're saying with that too. Um, yeah, just a lot, quite a bit to chew on. Food
Yeah.
for thought.
Well, and to your point with regarding the ego, what if that is kind of like that devil on the shoulder that you have to overcome in order to be able to find the kingdom, right?
Well, I mean, I feel it's what holds a lot of people to this material realm. As they say, we can't take any of this with us. So why do people hold on to it? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How many U-Hauls do you see following behind hearses?
oh,
Yeah. So anyway, I hope that was educational and insightful. It was actually relatively short. I thought it would have taken a lot longer. Well, it would have taken a lot longer had we gone through these particular scriptures. So if you are able to have a look at your Oxford Bible and see if you have any differences between that and your KJV, look up these particular scriptures to see if there's any differences. But basically,
my,
what you will notice between the texts that were translated from the Masoretic text is that they give more of like a denial of Christ kind of perspective, or should I say, denial of the Messiah of Christ. Okay, they're considered anti-Christian, and they were basically to refute the evidence of Christ being the prophesied Messiah. So you'll see those differences between the Septuagint and the Masoretic texts, so which most of our modern translations come from the Masoretic texts. So
yeah, I'm really curious to see what books I have on that shelves because I wound up. Well, ask and you shall receive, right? I wound up from book collection from a lady who definitely went into her Bible, who lost her husband. So there's books about spiritual warfare, there's books about death, and then I got a philosopher's book collection too. So very happy there. So the bookshelf I need to look at is literally right outside my bedroom door, and I know there's a big fat blue Oxford. And there's a few more, and I know it has the New English translation, so that one probably isn't it, but I'm not sure what else may be there. I don't remember seeing that other book though. But that's not to say it's not there, and I could have overlooked it, not realizing what it was.
Well, so I can tell you that the NET, or the New English Translation, and the NIV, the New International Version, both have at least 20 verses removed
Really?
in comparison to the KJV. Yeah, you can Google that. It's very easy to find. It shows like a listing of the different verses that were removed or were altered, but a good many of them were removed. And
That's what gets me, though.
Mhm.
How people, if you question anything, they're like, how dare you? But how can you not?
Well, a
It
lot of
doesn't make
people are,
sense to not question it.
the doctrine of sola scriptura, the scriptures um, are holy and perfect, and there's nothing missing from them, and that they validate themselves is difficult to reason with when you know that so many of the scriptura was removed. It's, you can't necessarily say, even just in the example that I gave between um Hebrews 10:5 and Psalm 40 verse 6. The other one is Luke 4:18 and Isaiah 61:1. I believe it's Luke 4:18. It's one of those. Isaiah 61:1 and either Luke 4:18 or Matthew 5:42. They're talking about something that is very different from one to the next. So it's worth looking into, and even going deeper into the different verses that have been removed over the years. It's, I can't confidently say, oh well, the Bible most certainly validates itself if these verses are entirely removed or changed. And just this handful of verses that I have on the screen here are the ones that are different between the Septuagint and the Masoretic translations. So look into it, do some digging. It's well worth it to get a fuller understanding, because clearly the Septuagint, and again, not saying that that's the perfect translation either, but that was the first time that it was transferred from Paleo Hebrew into Greek. Okay, so there were no vowel points added like the Masoretes had done. It was Paleo Hebrew, which is a very, very different script. It was closer to the Phoenician script than what we see as Hebrew now. So it was heavily altered, and a lot of that was to hide the Messiah or make him insignificant.
Hmm. Well, I might have packed that one away already because I'm not seeing it on this bookshelf unless Judah, this is the shelf that Judah likes to take my books off of. So I'm looking, and I do see the New English. I see the Life of Greece. I have Bible History Old Testament. I have the New English Bible. I have the New King James Bible, the English Standard Version. I might have packed it, but now I'm also curious to look at even the older one that I have too, to see if that's any different.
Yeah.
Oh poop! I might have.
I will be keeping my eyes open for an Oxford Study Bible.
Dang.
I do not have any of the Septuagint
It
translation.
doesn't feel like that though.
And I have tried really hard to learn Greek. I actually found it easier to learn Hebrew than Greek. So I guess I'm gonna have to revisit that because I need to know. I can go and I can read rudimentary Hebrew. I do have this one that I just recently got, but this is oh sorry, I'm gonna whack the thing. But this is Hebrew Old Testament and Greek New Testament. So it is not the Hebrew Old Testament. And I can tell you right now, just looking at it, it does have the diacritic marking. So it's, it's got the Masoretic vowel points in it. So this is clearly not a Septuagint version. I can tell you that. But still cool to be able to see it in Hebrew. But
I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder what I have.
I'm going to go ahead and end the recording here unless you have any other things you'd like to share with regards to the study.
Not at this moment. I feel like it, especially the last two verses certainly had. Oh, here, wait, I have more books over here. I didn't pack these ones yet. I just need light. Introduction to the Old Testament. Nope.
I have to go dig
Old
it.
Testament
I
theology.
don't think I have anything like that. But at last check, we had 26 Bibles, and I have since added 2 more, I think.
No, I don't see it.
We're up to 28.
I might have packed it. I remember seeing it, so I'm not sure where the heck it was, and I remember it being blue.
Well, it's always good to have lots of different translations. I have several, and that's how I've studied for many years now. I was looking at different translations, but now I have a new one to find, and I will find it online. Someone said you can find it online for free, so I'll have to go do some proper digging, and then we will take it from there. But I still want like a paper copy. So anyway. Here's to ending the recording.
Okay.